You can hear your own heartbeat. That's the worst part. Not the screaming, not the drums, not even the knowledge that in 90 seconds you'll be dead. It's the pounding in your ears, so loud it drowns out the prayers of the man beside you. His lips are moving. You can't hear the words. You realize your lips are moving too. When did you start praying? The Umayyad cavalry is 200 yards away now. 18,000 horsemen. The morning sun catches their armor, and for a moment they look like a river of molten gold flowing toward you. Beautiful. Terrible. You're a Frankish foot soldier. You don't have a horse. You have a shield, a spear, and a promise from Charles Martel that if you hold this line, Christendom survives. If you break, your wife becomes a slave. Your children convert or die. Your church becomes a mosque. 100 yards. This isn't supposed to be possible. For a century, the armies of Islam have been unstoppable. They took Jerusalem. They took Damascus. They took Alexandria and Carthage and all of North Africa. They crossed into Spain and devoured the Visigothic kingdom in 7 years. 7 years. Kingdoms that stood for centuries. Gone like morning mist. Now they're here. In Francia, the heart of Christian Europe. They've already burned Bordeaux. The smoke still rises behind them. 50 yards. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi commands the largest Muslim army ever assembled in Europe. Battle-hardened. Veteran. They've never lost. Not once. They believe God rides with them. They believe this land will be theirs by nightfall, just like all the others. They believe you'll run. 20 yards. Charles Martel has assembled 30,000 Franks on this field between Tours and Poitiers. Most of them are farmers, blacksmiths, men who've never seen war. He's formed them into a wall of shields and spears and told them to stand. Just stand. Don't advance. Don't retreat. Let the cavalry break themselves against you like waves against a cliff. 10 yards. The ground shakes. Thunder without clouds. They're close enough now that you can see individual faces. Young men, some younger than you. Their eyes are wide with the certainty of victory. Your heartbeat pounds. The man beside you screams. The golden river crashes into your shield, and the world becomes blood and iron and the question that will haunt historians for 13 centuries. How did 30,000 foot soldiers stop the greatest cavalry force the world had ever seen? 6 days earlier, the Frankish army didn't look like saviors of Europe. They looked like what they were. Exhausted men who'd marched 200 miles in October rain, wearing rust and desperation in equal measure. Charles Martel pushed them hard. No rest. No fires at night that might give away their position. Just mud and blisters and the whispered rumor that kept circulating through the ranks. The Muslims had 80,000 men. Maybe more. Numbers so large they seemed like a curse, not an army. But Charles knew something his men didn't. He'd fought the Saracens before at Toulouse a decade ago. He'd seen what their cavalry could do. The speed, the precision, the way they could shatter a Christian line in minutes and vanish like smoke before reinforcements arrived. He'd also seen them lose. Once, when they'd been forced to fight uphill, on broken ground, against an enemy who refused to chase them. So he chose his battlefield carefully. A wooded slope near the old Roman road between Tours and Poitiers. Forest at his back. Open ground in front where Abdul Rahman's cavalry would have to charge uphill. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was all he had. The men arrived in fragments. Local lords with their retainers. Germanic warriors still half-pagan. Burgundians who barely spoke Frankish. They weren't an army. They were a mob with spears. Charles walked among them the night before battle, and what he saw in their faces wasn't courage. It was terror. One man, a blacksmith from Austrasia, grabbed Charles's arm. "Lord," he whispered, "they say the Muslims can't be killed, that their swords are blessed by their God." Charles stared at him, didn't blink. Their God didn't stop them from bleeding at Toulouse. Form your line at dawn. Stand your ground. That's all I ask. But even Charles didn't sleep that night, because the scouts had returned with news that made his blood cold. The Muslim army wasn't just soldiers. It was a migration. Thousands of camp followers. Wagons loaded with plunder from Bordeaux, Aquitaine, every city they'd sacked. Gold, slaves, treasure beyond counting. Abdul Rahman wasn't raiding. He was conquering. This wasn't a battle. It was an invasion. And if the Franks broke tomorrow, there was nothing between the Umayyad Caliphate and the Atlantic Ocean. Nothing but 30,000 terrified farmers standing in the rain, waiting for dawn, waiting for the sound of hoofbeats that would decide whether Europe burned. And then, just before sunrise, they heard it. The sound doesn't come all at once. First, it's a distant rumble, like a storm that hasn't arrived yet. Then individual hoofbeats, thousands of them, overlapping, building into something that feels less like noise and more like an earthquake with intent. The Frankish line tightens. Shields lock. Spears drop to horizontal. Charles Martel rides behind them one last time, his voice cutting through the dawn mist. They expect you to run. Prove them wrong. Then he dismounts, steps into the line with his men. A duke fighting on foot like a common soldier. It's a gesture, but gestures matter when you're asking farmers to face professional killers. The Muslim vanguard appears first, light cavalry, probing for weakness. They sweep across the open ground in a crescent formation, loosing arrows as they ride. The Franks crouch behind their shields. Arrows thud into wood. A few find gaps. Men scream, fall. The line holds. The horsemen wheel away, reforming, testing. They expected a charge. Collapse. Something. The Franks just stand there, silent, shields raised like a wall of oak and iron. Abdul Rahman watches from a hill half a mile back. He's fought Berbers, Byzantines, Visigoths. He knows infantry. He knows how they break. You hit them fast, hit them hard, carve through their center before they realize what's happening. Cavalry always wins. Always. He signals the advance. This time it's not a probe. It's a hammer. 3,000 horsemen, lances leveled, charging uphill at the Frankish center. The ground shakes. The air fills with battle cries in Arabic. Allahu Akbar. A sound most of these Franks have never heard before. Sounds like the end of the world. The impact is catastrophic. Lances punch through shields. Horses crush men beneath their hooves. The front rank of the Frankish line crumples inward, bending like a bow under impossible weight. Men are screaming, dying. The shield wall, Charles's entire strategy, is buckling. For 30 seconds, it looks like the battle is already over. Then something happens that Abdul Rahman didn't anticipate. The second rank of Franks doesn't run. They step forward, fill the gaps, lock shields. Spearmen thrust upward into the bellies of horses. The cavalry slows, stalls. Horses rear and scream as spears find flesh. The charge stops. Not breaks, not retreats. Just stops. Frozen in a grinding, screaming stalemate 10 yards deep into the Frankish position. And that's when Abdul Rahman realizes his cavalry has made a terrible mistake. They're standing still. A war horse is a weapon, but only when it's moving. Standing still in a forest of spears, it becomes a target. 1,200 pounds of muscle and panic, trapped in a space where it can't maneuver, can't build speed, can't do the one thing it was bred for, a charge. The Franks realize this before the Muslims do. Spearmen step between the horses, thrusting upward. Not at the riders, at the animals. Hamstrings, bellies, throats. Horses scream in ways that don't sound like animals. They sound almost human. Riders topple. The Franks swarm them. No mercy. No prisoners. Axes and hammers rise and fall. The front edge of the Muslim cavalry disintegrates into a thrashing, screaming chaos of dying horses and dismounted men fighting for their lives in the mud. Abdul Rahman sees it happening. He's won 40 battles. He knows what this means. Cavalry caught in close quarters isn't cavalry anymore. It's expensive infantry with nowhere to run. He signals the retreat. Horns blow. The vanguard pulls back, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. The Franks don't pursue. Charles's orders were absolute. Hold the line. Don't break formation. Let them come to you. Some of the younger warriors scream in frustration, wanting to chase, wanting glory. The veterans grab them. You leave the line, you die alone. Abdul Rahman regroups. He's not worried. Not yet. This was a probing attack. He has 17,000 cavalry still fresh. The Franks have bled. Lost maybe 300 men in that first clash. Their line is thinner now. Weaker. He changes tactics. Instead of a concentrated charge at the center, he splits his forces. Cavalry units sweep left and right, looking for the flanks, trying to encircle the Frankish position. It's a classic maneuver. You pin the enemy's center, then crush them from the sides. This worked 1,000 times. But the Franks aren't fighting in an open field. Charles chose this ground deliberately. Forest protects one flank, a rocky slope the other. There's no room for a sweeping encirclement. The Muslims have to charge straight up the hill, again and again into that wall of shields and spears. So they do. For 6 hours, it's the same nightmare on repeat. Cavalry charges. Horses die. Men die. The line bends but doesn't break. Pull back. Regroup. Charge again. The Franks don't advance. Don't retreat. They just stand there, immovable, soaking up charge after charge like a stone absorbing waves. By noon, the ground is slick with blood. Muslim casualties are mounting, but so are the Franks. Charles can see his line thinning. Men collapsing from exhaustion, from wounds, from sheer terror finally breaking through. And then a scout reaches Abdul Rahman with news that changes everything. The Frankish camp is undefended. Inside the Frankish line, time stops meaning anything. There's no past, no future. Only the next breath, the next shield slam, the next spear thrust. Your arm doesn't feel like your arm anymore. It's a piece of wood attached to your shoulder, numb and useless except for the screaming pain when you lift the shield again. Someone's blood is in your mouth. You don't know whose. Could be yours. The man who was praying beside you this morning is gone. You don't remember seeing him fall. He's just gone. The smell is what breaks men. Not fear. Not pain. The smell. Split bowels and copper and something sweet rotten that you'll taste for weeks if you survive this. Horses are dying faster than men now. Their bodies create barriers, obstacles that the next wave has to navigate. Some of the Muslim cavalry are dismounting voluntarily, fighting on foot because their horses can't advance through the carpet of their own dead. A Berber warrior locks eyes with you across 3 feet of blood-soaked ground. He's younger than you, terrified just like you. His sword comes down. Your spear comes up. Someone's screaming. It might be both of you. Charles Martel stands 20 yards back, watching his line devour men like a grinding stone. He's not leading a battle anymore. He's managing a slaughter. The Franks are holding, but barely. He can see the tremors running through the shield wall, men on the edge of breaking. One panic. One man running. That's all it takes for a line to collapse. He moves behind the wavering sections, his voice a constant growl. One more hour. Just one more. But he knows that's a lie. This won't end in an hour. Abdul Rahman has committed maybe half his cavalry. The rest are circling, probing, waiting for the Frankish line to show a fatal weakness. And it will. Eventually. Men aren't made of iron. The sun climbs higher. The killing continues. It's not heroic. There are no grand duels, no moments of glory. This butcher's work. Slipping in mud and intestines. Stabbing at anything that moves on the other side of your shield. Praying your legs don't give out before there's dew. Then the rhythm changes. The Muslim cavalry pulls back again. But this time they don't regroup for another charge. They split. Half the force wheels away from the main battle, thundering east toward something the Franks can't see. Charles's face goes white. He knows exactly where they're going. The camp. The undefended camp where every piece of Frankish supplies, every reserve weapon, every wounded man is waiting. And if the Muslims take it, none of this matters. Abdul Rahman made his decision coldly, like a surgeon choosing where to cut. The Frankish line won't break from the front. Fine. Break their will instead. 8,000 horsemen peel away from the main battle, a golden flood racing toward the Frankish camp 2 miles east. The commanders leading the raid aren't fools. They know what they'll find there. Supplies, yes. Wounded men, yes. But more importantly, families. The Franks didn't march to war alone. Their camps are full of the blacksmiths' wives, the farmers' children, everyone who followed the army because staying home meant starving or worse. Take the camp, and the Franks stop fighting for Christianity. They start fighting to save their families. And men fighting to save their families abandon formations. Break ranks. Run. Charles sees the dust cloud rising in the east. He knows exactly what's happening. Every instinct he has screams at him to send reinforcements. Cavalry. Something. But he has no cavalry. He spent everything assembling this infantry line, and if he pulls men from it now to defend the camp, Abdul Rahman's remaining 10,000 horsemen will shatter what's left. He's trapped. Checkmate in slow motion. The men in the line can see the dust too. Whispers spread like poison. There at the camp. The camp's burning. Our families. The shield wall shudders. Men glance backward. Some take half steps out of formation. Charles can feel it happening. The discipline cracking like ice in spring. One man breaks. Then 5. Then 50. Hold! Charles roars, but his voice is drowned out by something worse than enemy war cries. The sound of Frankish men screaming their wives' names, their children's names, begging their commanders to let them go. The line begins to fragment. Abdul Rahman sees it from his hilltop command post. Finally, the crack he's been waiting for. He signals his reserve cavalry, the final 10,000, fresh and hungry. They form up for one massive charge. Not a probe, not a test, an execution. They'll hit the wavering Frankish center and punch straight through to where Charles himself is standing. The horns blow. The thunder begins again. This is the killing blow. The moment that will decide whether Europe speaks Arabic in 100 years. But something impossible happens in the Frankish camp 2 miles away. The Muslim cavalry reaches the tents, the supply wagons, the frightened families. They expect slaughter, easy plunder. What they find instead makes them forget about the battle entirely. They find the treasure of Aquitaine. Mountains of it. Gold from Bordeaux. Silver from 100 sacked churches. Silk and jewels and coin beyond counting, all taken from the raids that brought Abdul Rahman this far. And every single Muslim cavalryman stops fighting and starts looting. The unthinkable happens. 8,000 Muslim cavalry, men who fought from Damascus to the Pyrenees, see gold and forget their soldiers. It's not greed. Not exactly. They've been on campaign for months. Years, some of them. They've watched their comrades die in 100 nameless battles, promised that the plunder would come, that the reward would justify the blood. And now it's here, right here, unguarded. Discipline evaporates. Men dismount, start filling saddlebags with coins, jewels, silk. Officers scream orders that no one follows. Within minutes, the raid becomes a riot. Muslims fight each other over treasure. The camp isn't burning. It's being torn apart by men who came as wolves and became vultures. Back on the battlefield, Abdul Rahman doesn't know this yet. He's launched his final reserve. 10,000 cavalry in one apocalyptic charge meant to annihilate what's left of the Frankish center. Charles sees them coming. Does the math in his head. His line is bleeding, fragmenting. Men are still screaming about the camp, about their families. He has maybe 6,000 effective fighters left. Against 10,000 fresh cavalry. He makes a choice that will haunt military academies for centuries. Instead of shoring up his center, he pulls his best warriors, maybe 800 men, out of the line entirely. Creates a deliberate gap. Then positions them in a wedge behind it. It's suicide tactics. Bait. He's inviting the Muslim cavalry to punch through his center, then planning to hit them from the sides with his elite troops once they're committed. It might work. It will probably fail. If it fails, the battle is over in the next 5 minutes. The Muslim charge hits like a battering ram. The weakened Frankish center doesn't just bend, it shatters. Cavalry pours through the gap. Frankish soldiers scatter, running, dying, trampling each other to escape the hooves and blades. Charles's wedge formation strikes from both flanks, trying to close the gap like jaws. But there are too many Muslims. Too much momentum. The Frankish wedge is swallowed. Surrounded. Dying. Charles himself is in the center of it, hammer in hand, fighting like a man who knows he's watching Christendom collapse. An Umayyad spearman lunges at him. Charles sidesteps, crushes the man's skull. Another. His bodyguards are dying around him. The battle is lost. Everyone can feel it. And then, from the east, a sound rises that stops everything. Horns. Muslim horns. Blowing retreat. But Abdul Rahman never gave that order. Confusion is a weapon. And right now it's killing the Muslim army. The horns blowing retreat aren't coming from Abdul Rahman's command post. They're coming from the camp. From the 8,000 cavalry who abandoned the battle to loot and are now screaming that the Franks are counterattacking, that they're surrounded, that they need reinforcements immediately. None of it is true. The Frankish camp is barely defended, just old men and camp followers. But in the chaos of looting, in the confusion of men fighting each other over gold, panic spreads like wildfire. Someone sees a Frankish servant with an axe and screams, "Ambush!" 100 men believe him. They mount up, blow the horns, start riding back toward the main battle. Abdul Rahman hears the horns, doesn't understand. His cavalry is winning. They've broken through the Frankish center. Charles Martel himself is surrounded. Why would anyone signal retreat? He makes a split-second decision that will haunt Islamic chronicles for centuries. He assumes his camp force found a larger Frankish army approaching from the rear. Reinforcements he didn't know about. A trap. It's the only explanation that makes sense. So he recalls his cavalry. All of it. Even the ones currently butchering the Frankish center. The Muslim cavalry hears the horns. Hesitates. These are professional soldiers, they don't question orders. They disengage. Pull back. Leave Charles and his dying bodyguard alive in a circle of corpses. The Franks don't understand what's happening. They were losing. Clearly, decisively losing. And suddenly the enemy is retreating. Some think it's a trick. Others think it's a miracle. Charles doesn't care which. He screams at his men to reform the line. Now, before the Muslims realize their mistake. The Frankish shield wall reconstitutes like a broken bone setting itself. Ragged, uneven, but holding. Abdul Rahman rides toward his regrouping cavalry, trying to understand what's happening. His commanders are shouting contradictory reports. The camp was attacked. No, it wasn't. The treasure is secure. No, it's being stolen. There's a Frankish relief force. No, there isn't. And then a messenger reaches him. Young, terrified. The boy can barely speak. Lord, he gasps. The camp, our men, they abandoned the fight. For the plunder. There. Abdul Rahman doesn't let him finish. He understands now. His cavalry didn't find an ambush. They found gold. And chose it over victory. The greatest general in the Umayyad Caliphate realizes he's lost control of his army at the exact moment he needed it most. He makes one final decision. He'll personally lead a charge. Rally the men. Restore order. Win this battle through sheer will. He never sees the Frankish spear that takes him in the chest. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi dies the way he lived, on horseback, leading from the front, refusing to watch from safety while others bled. The spear punches through his armor just below the ribs. He doesn't fall immediately. Stays in the saddle for 3, maybe 4 seconds, long enough to see the shock spreading through his men's faces. Long enough to realize this is how it ends. Then he topples, hits the ground. The greatest Muslim general in Europe dies in French mud, surrounded by enemies who don't even know who they've killed. But his men know. The word spreads faster than wildfire. Al-Ghafiqi is down. The commander is dead. In an army held together by one man's tactical genius and personal authority, his death is a decapitation strike. Officers look around for orders that will never come. Units freeze, waiting for a commander who's bleeding out 50 yards away. The Franks don't know what happened. They just know the Muslim cavalry suddenly looks uncertain. Vulnerable. Charles sees it, that momentary paralysis, and makes the call he's been holding back for 8 hours. Advance! For the first time all day, the Frankish line moves forward. Not a wild charge. A measured, grinding push. Shields locked. Spears out. They step over their own dead and keep walking. The Muslims, leaderless and confused, pull back. Just a few yards at first, then more. The retreat becomes a rout. It happens faster than anyone expects. One Muslim unit breaks, rides hard for the rear. Others see them fleeing and think they know something. Panic is contagious. Within minutes, the entire Umayyad army is streaming away from the battlefield, abandoning weapons, wounded, everything. The Franks don't pursue far. They're too exhausted, too shattered. They watch the Muslims vanish into the dusk, barely believing what just happened. Night falls on a field that looks like hell's floor. Thousands of bodies, horses and men tangled together. The wounded crying for water in Arabic, in Frankish, in languages no one present can name. Frankish soldiers move through the carnage, finishing the enemy wounded. No prisoners, no mercy. This is survival, not honor. Charles walks the field in the dark, counts the cost. He's lost maybe 4,000 men. The Muslims left at least 10,000 dead, maybe more. But numbers don't tell the story. The story is simpler. The unstoppable army stopped. But as dawn breaks on October 11th, 732, Charles faces a horrifying question. Where did the Muslim army go? And will they come back? The morning after Poitiers, Charles Martel sends scouts in every direction. They return with the same report. The Muslim army is gone. Not regrouping, not preparing a counterattack. Gone. Fleeing south toward the Pyrenees in fragments, abandoning their wounded, their supplies, everything that would slow them down. They're not retreating. They're running. Charles stands on the hilltop where Abdul Rahman commanded yesterday. From here, he can see the entire battlefield. The crows have already arrived. Thousands of them, so many the sky looks black. The smell will linger for months. Locals will avoid this place for years, claiming they hear screams on quiet nights. He doesn't feel victorious. He feels numb. 30,000 men marched here 6 days ago. Maybe 24,000 are walking away. Farm boys who'll never farm again. Blacksmiths who'll never lift a hammer without remembering the weight of a sword. Men who'll wake up screaming for the rest of their lives. But they stopped the invasion. That's what the priests will say. That's what the chroniclers will write. Charles the Hammer, Carolus Martellus, who saved Christianity with a shield wall and sheer bloody stubbornness. The Muslim chronicles tell it differently. They speak of betrayal, of cavalry who chose gold over glory, of a commander martyred by his own men's greed. They'll return to Iberia and never cross the Pyrenees in force again. The conquest stops here. Forever. Historians will debate Poitiers for 13 centuries. Some will call it the most important battle in European history, the day that decided whether Europe would be Christian or Muslim. Others will dismiss it as a large raid, nothing more, overhyped by Christian propaganda. But here's what's not debatable. After Poitiers, the Islamic expansion into Western Europe ends. The Umayyad Caliphate, which conquered from India to Spain in a single century, never again threatens the Frankish kingdoms. The map of Europe is drawn in the blood spilled on this field. Charles will go on to unite the Frankish kingdoms. His grandson Charlemagne will become the first Holy Roman Emperor. The dynasty that saves Europe at Poitiers will rule it for generations. But on this morning, October 11th, 732, Charles doesn't know any of that. He just knows that 30,000 farmers held a line that professional soldiers said couldn't be held. He turns away from the battlefield, toward home, toward whatever comes next. Behind him, the crows feast, and in the mud and blood and shattered shields, the future of Europe quietly takes root. The conquest was stopped, but the question remains, what if just one man in that Frankish line had broken?